Hey guys, Miss Mandee here with the Huntsville-Madison County Public Library, bringing you guys another STEM video. We're going to talk about some science. It's going to be icebergs and mammoths. I love woolly mammoths. Okay, but first we got to start with ice, okay? Does anybody know the difference between a glacier and an iceberg? I'm going to tell you anyway. Okay, so first, a glacier is a really large, thick area of snow where the snow was built up so much and it's gotten heavy, it causes the bottom couple of layers of snow to melt. When you're somewhere super cold and you have water, what happens to it? It freezes. So then you end up with ice on the bottom. Well, that ice is kind of slippery, right? So this big landmass of snow and ice, if there's any incline or a hill at all, that big landmass is going to start to shift and move. And once it starts sliding, it's a glacier. So a glacier is a big mass of snow and ice that moves on land. Okay? I know, crazy, right? Now, the higher the incline, the faster it moves. Some glaciers take thousands of years to move from where they started to the ocean. Some take that long. Some of them, with a pretty steep incline, move pretty fast. In fact, let me look at the name. The Columbia Glacier in Alaska actually moves 5 feet per hour. You can watch this thing move if you wanted to. I mean, that's really cool. I would love to see that. So, glaciers move. Now, if a glacier reaches the ocean, like it finally gets to the ocean, well, once it's moving, it doesn't stop. I mean, when you have something that heavy, an object in motion tends to stay in motion, especially when there's ice involved, and it just keeps sliding. So what happens when it gets to the ocean is, if this is the land, your glacier starts to slide off the edge of the land where the ocean is, and it starts to weaken and starts to crack, and then boom, it breaks off, causing what is called an ice shelf. It's like a big giant cliff of snow and ice, and the ocean is down there. So when the end of a glacier breaks off and falls in the ocean, that's an iceberg. So an iceberg comes from a glacier. Now this is the largest ice shelf in the world. It's like a cliff of ice, and it's in Antarctica, okay? Which is super cold there, right? It's at the bottom of the world. So it's called the Ross Ice Shelf. They named it because it's the biggest. Why wouldn't they? Now, when this process happens, when it breaks off, there's a term for that. It's called calving. It almost looks like calving, but it's pronounced calving. Okay, so piece of a glacier breaks off. It's called calving. Then you have an iceberg. Okay, all right. From the time a glacier forms until it reaches the ocean, like I said, could take thousands of years. So some icebergs are older than the pyramids in Egypt. That is some old ice. I mean, the pyramids are like 4,500 years old, and there's ice out there older than that. That's crazy. Okay, so icebergs kind of sound like a big giant ice cube floating around in the ocean, right? Well, it's a little more dangerous than that. Now, what you see in the water is only a small amount of what lies beneath. Now, this whole entire thing is an iceberg, but you only see that little bit at the top if you're in a boat or something. So you look at it and go, it's kind of big. It's like a big hill, but we're going to be okay. And then you get closer to it and it's way bigger than that. 90% of an iceberg is under the water where you can't see it. This is exactly what happened to the Titanic. Yep, that super famous ship that hit an iceberg and sunk to the bottom of the ocean. The night was super calm and clear. Now, if there's really stormy seas and the waves are really big, they're gonna crash up against this iceberg and make that foamy white stuff. You're gonna see it. Well, the night the Titanic hit it, the seas were pretty calm. If the water is calm and there's really not any waves, it is next to impossible to see this in the dark. So by the time they could see it through binoculars, because that's really all they had back then, it was too late. The ship was too big. It couldn't turn fast enough to get away from it. They thought they were clear, but underneath, it was just too big. And it tore and gouged a big old hole in the side of the Titanic, which made it fill with water, and down it went. So icebergs can be deadly that way, but they can also, when they break off, the calving we talked about, when they break off and fall in the ocean, if it's a big enough piece, a big enough iceberg that breaks off of this and it slams into the ocean, it can actually cause a tsunami, which is a super big wave. I don't mean like you're at the beach and people are surfing and there's a really big wave. No, I mean like a wave big enough to actually go over land. It could destroy a harbor, even a city. So if a super big iceberg breaks off of this, you better hope nobody's in the way of that wave as it goes away. Think of taking a really big rock and chunking it in a lake. All those ripples that come off of it, when they get big enough, that's considered a tsunami. Okay, so super big wave can be caused by an iceberg. So who knew those things could be so dangerous? And in fact, we're going to do a little demonstration of that right now. Hopefully my ice is solid enough for this. I forgot to put it in the freezer last night. Now, if you have a balloon, that's the best way to do it. But my balloons were at work and I wasn't, so that doesn't help me at all. So I used a Ziploc bag. And you can kind of, you know, once you get it full of water, you can kind of bunch it up and sit it in the freezer and make like an iceberg shape if you want to. But really the shape doesn't matter that much because an iceberg breaks off of a glacier. So they're all different sizes. Okay, try and reach in here and grab it without dropping it. Ice is really slippery. Let's see if I can do this. I'm going to pour what's left of the water in there. All right. Here's Baxter. My hand is frozen. All right. So I'm going to drop. In fact, I'm going to get it away from the books. Water and books don't mix, people. All right. So I'm going to drop the iceberg in the ocean. Do you see how the water splat? Oh, it's got a hole in it. Hold on. Let me flip it over. It helps if your iceberg doesn't have a hole in it. There we go. So did you see how the water splashed up out of it? That's just like when an iceberg breaks off from a glacier. And if you notice, if my cameraman can pan down, you see this little bit of ice at the top? That's all you see. But here's the water line right here. So all you see is this bit. But underneath, it's so slippery. Underneath is all that. So icebergs are very, very hard to see all of. They're very deceptive. They're sneaky that way. All right. If you have a bigger tub of water, you can just throw icebergs in there. I would suggest doing that outside because, well, this is my kitchen. If I make a little bit of mess, it's okay, but your parents may not like me very much if you do it in the kitchen. So that's a cool experiment. You can also test and see, now the ocean, is it fresh water or salt water? Salt water. So you could put a ton of salt in your bowl of water or your bucket, Baxter's coming in on the experiment. So you can put a ton of salt in your water and then put your iceberg in it and see if it makes a difference on how it floats. Now, if the ocean is salt water, can anybody guess if an iceberg and a glacier, since they come from the same thing, are they freshwater or saltwater? It's floating in salt water because it's in the ocean, but they're actually freshwater. Glaciers and icebergs are made from frozen precipitation. So like snow and sleet, things like that. If it comes from the sky, it's freshwater. So the glacier, the iceberg are freshwater. In fact, all the glaciers and all the icebergs in the world make up 70% of the world's freshwater. That's crazy town. When they really only make up 1.7% of the water on Earth, because our oceans are way bigger, but that's all salt water. So 70% of our fresh water come from glaciers and ice. It's pretty cool, right? All right, now, let me find where I was in my notes. I lost my place. Oh no, okay. About 1.8 million years ago, so a long, long time ago, 1.8 million years, we entered a time known as the Ice Age. Getting to the woolly mammoths now. So entered a time called the Ice Age. Now this doesn't mean that the whole world was iced over, like we weren't one big giant chunk of ice floating in space. That's not what the Ice Age was. But there was a lot of ice. Now if you can picture, I wish I had a globe. If you could picture the Earth, you know the North Pole is at the top, and the South Pole is where Antarctica is. Well, the North Pole is in the Arctic, okay? The Arctic has glaciers and icebergs. Well, during the Ice Age, that ice it extended all the way over Canada into the United States, down as far as like where Kentucky is. Can you imagine getting in your car, driving up through Tennessee into Kentucky and running into a glacier? That would be crazy. But during the Ice Age, that's how far the glaciers came down, okay? So the whole world wasn't ice, but a lot of it was. All right, so during this period of time is when one of my favorite animals were around, the woolly mammoth. They're so cool. They're kind of like hairy elephants, really, if you think about it. They're super hairy elephants. They have big tusks, but elephants have tusks too. Their tusks could be up to 15 feet long. That's crazy. So like from where it comes out of their lip all the way to the end could be like 15 feet. They also had really tiny ears. Like the elephants we know of, they have pretty big ears, some bigger than others. Theirs were so small to help them not get frostbite on them, because you know, if you went into the Arctic where it was super cold and you didn't have earmuffs on or some sort of hat, your poor little ears would just freeze and almost fall off. It's just so cold there. So they had super tiny ears, so tiny you can't see them. All their hair covered it up. It's like wearing earmuffs. Now, now these guys went extinct, how long ago? It's on here. They went extinct 5,700 years ago, okay? Their closest living relative is the Asian elephant, okay? So closest living relative. They're not exactly the same, but they're pretty close on a genetic level. You see, they didn't have very big ears, but bigger than the woolly mammoth. Now, how do we know they had such small ears? When an animal a long time ago dies, you know, it's going to decompose. Usually the only thing that's left is a skeleton or sometimes a fossil if it's really old. Anybody know what your ears are made of? Cartilage. The same thing the end of your nose is made of. It's squishy. It can move around. It can bend. That stuff is just tissue. And it's going to go away pretty quick after an animal dies. It's going to decompose kind of like skin and muscle does. So if the ear, there wouldn't be any ears if it was just a skeleton. So how do they know? Because they have found in ice super well preserved mammoth mummies. I know, it's crazy, right? This guy, mummified, meaning like a mummy, this mummified carcass of a 39,000-year-old woolly mammoth. 39,000 years. Like, I can't even comprehend how big that is. The pyramids in Egypt are 4,500 years old. 39,000! Wait a minute. It still has skin. It still has hair on it. It even has its nose. What was our nose made of? Cartilage. Now, they can move their nose like an elephant does, you know? So theirs probably also had muscle, a little bit of cartilage in it, you know, because they had to be able to move theirs. I mean, I can't move my nose. So that should have gone away a long time ago. But their nose is still there. In fact, when they went in there and looked around, they found its last meal that it ate before it died inside its stomach. That's right, the food was still there. And in the intestines, they even found some feces. That's science for poop. Yeah, there was still some poop in there. So that's a lot left over. How did that happen? Well, it probably got stuck in some mud and it couldn't get out, and it froze there. The ice kept it so well preserved that, in fact, there's even some DNA left in there. And scientists, this is how we know how small their ears were, by the way, because the ear is there, so you can see it. Now, when the Ice Age ended, so did our woolly mammoth friends. Climate change caused a change in the food sources. They didn't have enough to eat. These guys can eat 660 pounds of food a day. A day. 660 pounds. No wonder they were starving if their food ran out. And not only that, well, we humans thought they were pretty tasty. We kind of sort of ate them into extinction. I know it's really bad. We ate them into extinction because, well, let's face it, if it's super cold outside, they're hairy. That would make a really nice coat if you were cold, and that's a lot of meat to feed your family. So I understand it, I get it, but it's kind of sad that we ate them into extinction. But remember how I said DNA was left over in this little guy? And who was their closest living relative? The Asian elephant. So they're taking some DNA from the woolly mammoth, DNA from the Asian elephant. They're going to mix it all together, and they're going to try and create a woolly mammoth. I don't know if they can do it. I don't even know if they've started, but I know that they said that they were going to try. And you know what? That'd be kind of cool because, I mean, just think, one day you could go to a zoo and see a woolly mammoth all for yourself. That's all I got for you guys this time. So I'll see you next time with some more science. Bye.